Welcome to the channel where powerful stories come to life. Get ready for truth, emotion, and transformation, one story at a time. You know those situations that feel like scenes from a movie but actually happen right under our noses? Well, there are still people who believe they can measure someone's worth just by their appearance. And worse, they do it every single day without even realizing it. Now imagine this. The owner's wife, disguised as an employee, walks into her own company's coffee shop to grab a coffee, only to be humiliated by a clerk who had no idea who he was talking to. Sounds like fiction? This story actually happened. But the most surprising part wasn't the mistake, and it was the turnaround. Because unlike what most people would do, yell, fire, expose, she chose to teach. And the lesson was so powerful that it didn't just transform the clerk. It transformed the entire company. In fact, most people only realize how many prejudices they carry after going through a test like this. And maybe, just maybe, you're making those same mistakes without even noticing. So here's the invitation. Watch this story until the end. What happened here may not only change the way you see others, but also the way you deal with people. At home, at work, in life. And I promise you, the change starts much sooner than you think. That seemingly ordinary morning, Sofia walked into the company's coffee shop with light, almost invisible steps. Dressed simply, jeans, a basic shirt, and a casual bun, she looked like just another new employee trying to find her way in the corporate world. And here lies a point few understand. The greatest stories often begin disguised in simplicity. As she approached the counter with a polite smile, she ordered an espresso. That's when Murilo, with a superior air and the sarcastic tone only the insecure have mastered, sneered, "These newbies can't even order a simple coffee. Imagine working here." What Murilo didn't know, and what many don't know in life, is that behind that modest appearance lay a gigantic story. But that's where people stumble, judging the cover without even flipping through the pages. How many times have you done this without realizing it? With the client who shows up in flip-flops at a jewelry store, or with the young man wearing a worn-out t-shirt in a job interview. The truth is, the greatest talents, fortunes, and courage often come disguised in simplicity. It's like that old story of Warren Buffett driving his beat-up car. From the outside, no one imagines the depth within. But look, my friend, Sofia didn't react in that moment. And here comes a precious lesson. Not every offense deserves an immediate response. Sometimes wisdom lies in listening, observing, and planning. It's in that strategic silence that many transformative stories begin to be written. And Murilo had no idea that that cup of coffee would ignite something much bigger. Oh, if Murilo only knew who he was dealing with. Sofia wasn't just another employee trying to adapt. Behind that calm smile was a story of building, vision, and purpose. She not only co-founded the company alongside her husband, Leonardo Farias, but was also responsible for many of the social projects that built the corporation's reputation. While Leonardo shone under the spotlight as CEO, Sofia preferred silent work, behind the scenes, impacting lives far from the vanity of boardroom meetings. And this is something few people talk about. True power often makes no noise. The grandest stories don't shout, they build. Think of Melinda Gates, for example. While many knew Bill, she quietly worked on initiatives that now transform entire communities. Sofia did the same. While some sought recognition, she sought transformation. And that's where the real difference lies between those who lead for status and those who lead with purpose. The ironic part is that Murilo, while mocking Sofia's appearance, was ignoring the very heart that sustained many of the projects securing his own job. But Sofia didn't carry resentment. She carried strategy. She knew that in some situations the best way to teach isn't with lectures, but with experience. And Murilo had no idea that the story he was about to live would forever change how he saw people. Instead of acting on impulse as many would, Sofia chose the harder and wiser path. Rather than pulling Murilo aside or publicly exposing him, she saw in that situation a valuable learning opportunity. After all, the best stories of transformation are born when someone has enough patience to teach instead of punish. With Leonardo and the HR department's support, she began designing a program focused on empathy and respect in customer service. See how interesting it is? How many companies lose talents or create toxic environments because they fail to invest in human development? A well-structured training can be a true game changer. Sofia knew this. As a mentor, I always say, a good sensitivity program isn't about theory. It's about making people see the human behind every face. For example, customer service simulations, active listening exercises, walk in someone else's shoes, workshops, practical activities that take employees out of their comfort zone. As the program took shape, Sofia observed every stage with the calm of someone who understands the power of a well-told story. It wasn't about humiliating Murilo. It was about transforming him. Because deep down she knew most people don't act out of malice, but out of ignorance, repeating patterns they've never questioned. And that was exactly what was about to change in the days ahead. The big day arrived. The room was filled with attentive employees, all participating in the training without any idea of what was coming. Among them was Sofia, once again disguised, sitting like just another anonymous employee among her colleagues. Murilo, still unsuspecting, carried out his tasks with the same air of superiority, thinking it was just another corporate formality. Little did he know that this story was about to take a turn he would never forget. And look how wise life is. Many times, learning only happens when you're faced with your own reflection. At the end of the training, Leonardo Farias stood up and, with a calm smile, called Sofia to the front of the room. Casually, he revealed to everyone, "This is Sofia, my wife, and co-founder of everything we've built here." The silence that filled the room was almost tangible. Murilo, pale, felt the full weight of the judgment he had passed days earlier. There, in front of everyone, his story and Sofia's became unexpectedly intertwined. Now pay attention. This was not a spectacle meant to humiliate. It was an opportunity to open everyone's eyes, his and the others. As they say, life comes full circle, and sometimes those circles are disguised as lessons. Right there in front of the whole team, the seed for the next chapter was planted, because what would follow wasn't punishment, but an invitation for true transformation. After that revelation, the conversation naturally started spreading through the company halls. And like in many stories in corporate life, when the first stone is moved, many others appear. Murilo's colleagues began sharing past incidents, sarcastic comments, jokes disguised as humor, subtle contempt towards new employees, and even towards some customers who appeared more modest. Little by little, what seemed like an isolated slip was revealed to be a deeply rooted pattern in his behavior. And here's something many people fail to realize. Prejudice rarely starts with major offenses. It shows up in small daily choices, in how you serve someone, in your tone of voice, in a look of disdain and rushed assumptions. Murilo, like many others, didn't see malice in what he did, but each comment was a brick in a wall of exclusion. And the company, attentive to these hidden stories, understood that it wasn't only Murilo who needed to change. The entire environment needed a wake-up call. That's when HR, together with Sofia and Leonardo, decided it was the perfect time to take a step forward. It wasn't enough to just point out the problem. A real path for learning had to be offered. And so came the proposal that would change not only Murilo's trajectory but the entire company culture. Because like every good story of transformation, the best was yet to come. Instead of issuing a simple and bureaucratic punishment, Leonardo, with Sofia's support, chose a much more powerful path, turning the mistake into a real opportunity for growth. The proposal was clear. Murilo would join a mentorship program led by Sofia, directly assisting in social projects aimed at underprivileged youth. A decision filled with wisdom. The most powerful stories are not born from shame, but from lived experience. And see how practical this is. Putting someone in contact with different realities broadens perspectives in a way no slideshow ever could. Murilo began visiting shelters, community schools, and professional training centers where young people fought daily for opportunities. There, where the shine of suits didn't reach, he saw faces full of strength, dignity, and dreams. Like that businessman who, after volunteering at an NGO, returns to his company with a renewed vision of leadership, more human, more empathetic. This kind of experience stirs something inside, because it puts the ego into perspective. Murilo started hearing stories from people who had suffered judgments like the ones he made, from single mothers striving to make a living, from hardworking young people overlooked in interviews because of their clothes or address. And that small seed planted back in the training finally began to sprout. But true transformation still had much to reveal. As months went by, something inside Murilo began to shift. That subtle arrogance that once shaped his gestures gave way to a more attentive gaze, a more willing ear, and above all, a far more humble posture. The stories, He heard in the social projects weren't just narratives, they were mirrors. Each young person fighting to overcome social barriers made him reflect on the privileges and unconscious biases he carried without realizing. Here lies a powerful lesson few truly understand. Real change doesn't come from imposition, it comes from awareness. Like when someone reads The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, or How to Win Friends and Influence People, and suddenly realizes that leadership isn't about status, but about service. Murilo started to value the simple act of listening. He began to see each coworker not by their uniform, but by the story each one carried before stepping into that company. This changed the way he served, led, and related to others. Naturally, this transformation became visible to everyone. Colleagues who once avoided him now saw someone willing to learn and redeem himself. Sofia, with her patient wisdom, followed every step of this journey with the calm of someone who knew from the start that the longest path tends to be the strongest. And there was still one last gesture Murilo needed to make to seal this new chapter of his story. At a gathering organized to celebrate the end of that first phase of the program, Murilo took the initiative to do something not everyone has the courage to. He asked to speak. With a racing heart but a clear conscience, he looked at Sofia and the entire team, and in a simple yet profound gesture, he apologized. It wasn't a mechanical, rehearsed apology. It was genuine, from someone who had truly grasped the depth of the lesson. And it's in these stories that we see the true power of humility. It's important to understand, a sincere apology doesn't erase the past, but it opens the way for a different future. Murilo didn't try to justify his mistakes. He simply acknowledged how wrong his judgments had been, and how that had blinded him to the value of the people around him. And it's curious how often a simple "I'm sorry" carries more weight than 1,000 explanations. As Brené Brown once said, vulnerability is not weakness. It's the greatest demonstration of courage. The impact was immediate. Other employees, moved by the scene, also began reflecting on their own behaviors. What was once just Murilo's story was now becoming a collective movement of transformation within the company. But no one yet imagined the ripple effect this change would have on the entire organizational culture. What started with a simple cup of coffee became a silent revolution inside the company. Inspired by Sofia's story and Murilo's transformation, Leonardo decided to officially establish what had already been happening naturally, the creation of a permanent training program based on empathy, respect, and inclusion. It wouldn't be just another mandatory course people complete to check a box. It would be a true consciousness lab, where each employee would have the chance to revisit their own filters and judgments. And here's a point that applies to all of us. Companies that understand the value of these human stories build solid and resilient cultures. Take Starbucks, for example, which created the Leading the Way program precisely to address unconscious bias and foster a more inclusive environment. What Sofia's company did was similar, but with an even more powerful detail. It was born from within, from a real case, lived by everyone. That gives weight, truth, and soul to the process. Over time, the results began to show. The organizational climate improved, customer service became more humanized, and most importantly, people began to see each other not by clothing or position, but by the stories each person carries. And so, from an incident that could have ended in conflict, the company found one of its greatest treasures, the ability to transform through listening and example. Now tell me honestly, how many times have you looked at someone and, without even realizing, jumped to conclusions? Exactly, most people do it automatically. And the real danger isn't making the mistake. It's not even noticing that you are. Stories, like Sofia's, exist precisely for this, to give us that reality check life will demand later on, when it's much more painful. Now the question is, what will you do with this reflection? Will you keep judging by appearance, or will you start listening to the stories that each person carries? Because in the end, that's what separates those who merely occupy space from those who truly lead and inspire. And believe me, the sooner you change this perspective, the more doors will open, not just at work, but in every aspect of life. If you want to keep learning these valuable lessons, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with us. Here, with every new story, you'll discover what few have the courage to teach. And believe me, the next ones will touch you even deeper.